Today's Torah study session. Today is Tuesday, April 6th, and I am Rabbi Dovid Vigler. We're learning today Tanya, which is deep Jewish wisdom. We're in chapter 43. We're learning about love. We're learning about love in our evolving relationship with God as we're becoming more conscious, as we're becoming more aware, more sensitized to the reality of life that surrounds us. It's not to be taken for granted that you're awake just because you're not asleep. We can easily be asleep and awake at the same time. Just because you've got your eyes open, it doesn't mean that your heart and soul are conscious. That's what we're doing here in our Torah study here this morning as we progress through the Tanya. We're actually studying Tanya in this book, the Practical Tanya. The Practical Tanya, I'm sure you can find it on Amazon, or you can buy it through the shul if you want. You can call the shul to buy a copy, 561-624-2223. And we are starting today on page 558. Now, as I normally do in Tanya, I don't normally teach it out of the text of Tanya. I find that when it comes to teaching Tanya, to learning Tanya, it's easy to lose sight of the forest because of the trees. The text is so intense, it's so dense, that it's very easy to lose track of the trajectory when you get stuck in the words. And that's why my style of teaching Tanya is more paraphrased. And I highly encourage you, after we study, to go read the text yourself so that you can put things in the proper context and see them in the words of the Alter Rebbe and the author of the Tanya. Welcome to Rob Berger, Winston, and Elaine that I can see. Anyone else and to Steve that's here with us. Anyone else that's watching with us live or later, thank you for being here with us. And I'm going to go straight into it right now. So what we're learning about today is we're in chapter 43. So this means that from chapters 40 through 50 of Tanya, and you know, the Tanya ends at chapter 53, at least the first part of Tanya ends in chapter 53. What we're doing through chapters 40 through 50 is basically nurturing our emotional connection with God. We've spent some significant time in the past 3 chapters learning about developing the foundational emotion when it comes to a healthy relationship with anything or anyone, certainly with the master of the universe, with God. And that was through the emotion of awe, also sometimes translated as fear. Fear not in a very negative sense, but fear in a positive sense, like respect or awe. And we spoke about the 2 levels of awe. There was the lower level of awe and the higher level of awe. I'm not even going to get into that right now because it was a very nuanced and a very beautiful distinction between them, where we can really separate the men from the mice, in the sense that we have to ask ourselves, what kind of emotional maturity do we really harbor? How serious are we really in our relationship with the master of the universe, with God? How much are we willing to humble ourselves as we approach the divine? But today we cross over from awe to love, which is the other side and the other foundational emotion. Generally speaking, you have a right arm and a left arm. Right is love, left is awe. Right is closeness, left is distance. What's known in the language of Kabbalah, chesed, kindness, and gevura, which is discipline. So love and awe are 2 wings, which we've learned about in earlier chapters. 2 wings of a bird. You actually need both of them in order for the bird to be able to fly. You need love as well as awe. What we're learning today is that there's 2 kinds of love. Now, we're not going to learn about the higher love, at least not today. The higher level of love is a love that is a gift from above. That's the higher level of love. It's called Ahava Rabbah, the great love, also sometimes known as Ahava B'Ta'anugim, a pleasurable love. This is the gift that God gives us, where we're actually able to experience divine revelation, The way I like to describe it is American Express Black. Now, I'm still waiting for my invitation from American Express Black. I check the mail every day. It hasn't come yet. But from what I understand, in order to get accepted into this club, you have to be invited by them, by the higher-ups, the higher echelons.
$2,500 a year, too.
Fine. No, $2,500 a year. Okay. But they have to invite you. You cannot even request to be accepted into this club of American Express Black. And therefore, you have to be found worthy by them in order to be accepted. And that's how I understand this idea of Ahava Rabbah, of the great love, which is a higher level of love, which you can only be gifted from above. When you've reached the highest levels of what you're able to achieve on your own divine service, that is when heaven issues you an invitation and says, "Okay, welcome to the club." You know, I'd love to experience that one day. That would be nice. An aspiration to reach out to. Good morning, Marty. Good to see you. Howard and Susan from Boynton and Terry from Atlanta, Georgia. Great to have you all with us. Our class goes international. Okay, so the one love that we are going to talk about today is a very down-to-earth, very practical love. It's called Ahavas Olam. Ahavas Olam, which means love of the world. Why is it called love of the world? Because one interpretation of this, of the meaning of the name, is that it's for everybody. If you're just a resident of this earth, you're capable of reaching this love. It is not outside of your reach. Friends, if you can love your spouse, you can reach this love. If you can love your child, or if you can love any other human being, then you can love Hashem, God, Master of the universe, your source, your creator, your life source. You can reach this love. It is practical, it is realistic, but it's not going to come to you automatically. We live in the instant generation. You know, if a website takes more than 14 seconds to load, it's like we're exasperated, right? If we're stuck in traffic for 2 minutes longer than usual, we're already uttering choice words, God forbid. It's okay. It's going to take some work. As I heard from one of the game rangers in the Kruger National Park in South Africa, we're sitting there, we're waiting for the leopards, and he says to me, "Good things come to those who wait," says this game ranger from Africa. Good things come to those who wait. You got to work on it. You know, nothing comes easy. Easy come, easy go. When a relation, when an emotion takes work in order to build, you will make it yours. You're going to own it. So what is this meditation of Ahavas Olam? Another reason why it's called Ahavas Olam, the love of the world, is not only because it's applicable to anybody in the world, but it's a love that comes through the world. It's a love that comes through meditating upon the world. Let me go straight into it. So what is this love? Now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. Good morning, Andy. Ahavas Olam, as we say in Kabbalat Shabbat, Ahavas Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Ahavta. We don't only say that, Andy, on Friday night. We say it every single morning, I believe. I believe we say it every single morning in the just before the Shema. So it's every single day of the year that we say Ahavas Olam in our morning prayers. Let me go straight into the heart of the matter. What is Ahavas Olam? So you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that if you're in a room, right, with other people, and one of them is the janitor, and the other one is the president of the United States. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to say, you know, I'm more excited to spend time with the president of the United States than I am with the guy who's cleaning this room. Now, no offense to the guy that's cleaning the room. He's still a decent human being worthy of our love and our respect and our kindness and our compassion and everything else. But realistically speaking, you know, one of these two people has a lot more power and a lot more influence than the other. You know, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand this. Another example. If you have $100,000 to invest, what are you going to do with $100,000? Well, you can either invest it in junk, Or you could invest it in some amazing company or some amazing stock. Now, again, this is not like genius stuff. It's okay. You understand that if you invested in Apple or in Amazon or in Google or some, very successful company, you'll probably make more money than if you invested in some fly-by-night, never heard of before company that may or may not fizzle out and fail, right? So it's about worth. It's about value. When we look around us, we can make some very sensible decisions about what is worth our effort and what is not worth our effort. If you see a 40-year-old man who's laying flat on his stomach on the floor and he's playing with trains and motor cars, it's like, okay, fine. You're like, I guess he likes to play with motor cars. And you see another 40-year-old person who is, I don't know, business suit, and he is in the boardroom and he's signing mega deals. Okay. Then you look at a guy and you say, well, one of them is investing his time in making a lot of money, and the other one's investing his time in narishkeit and like nothing. Okay, so the one is wasting his time and one is using his time to support his family. It's very nice. When it comes to our emotion, the most expensive piece of real estate on earth is not in Manhattan. It's not in Palm Beach. The most expensive piece of real estate in this earth is right here in your heart. There's not much of it. There's a very small piece of real estate, and you can only have emotion to a limited amount of things. Your brain space, your RAM, can only be invested on a certain amount of consciousness, of awareness. What are you going to be spending your thinking and your feeling on? Do you want to be spending it playing with trains and cars? Or do you want to be spending it making mega bucks? Do you want to be spending your time eating cake and ice cream and cookies? Or do you want to be drinking fine wine and aged meats and other, expensive and exquisite and healthy foods, right? So this is a choice we can make. When it comes to our emotion, when we look at the world around us, if we choose not to be reactive, to just react to everything that happens to present itself in front of my face, and we take a step back, fortress mentality, and we think about, okay, where do I want to invest? Not my money, not even my time, but something more precious than my money, more precious than my time. Where do I want to invest my attachment? To what do I want to connect with? Where do I want to invest my consciousness and my emotion? Now, if you ever got married, you've obviously made a decision to choose one person over all of the rest of humanity, right? Now, that decision involved a process where you were like, well, there's this person that I met, I think that I could do a lot better with this person than with anybody else. So you made a commitment. Ahavas Olam, the love of the world, calls upon us to discern the world around us. Good morning, Miriam. To discern the world around us, to make a decision on what is the most valuable investment of our consciousness. And when we look around, we realize the following realization: that nothing that exists in this earth is deserving of our love, because nothing upon this earth has any true value. Nothing upon this earth has any true value. Why is that? Here is the reason. And this is all explained in Tanya, page 558 in the practical Tanya. I'm just using my own words to explain this idea. So the idea is like this, is that when you take a step back and you look at the bigger picture, when you're like looking from a little tiny perspective, then it's difficult to see the bigger picture. But if you take a step back and you say, okay, so everything that exists has been created by God. Now, God didn't only create the world 5,000 years ago, God continues to create the world. We've, at every single moment in time, we've spoken about this idea. It's called the doctrine of perpetual creation. It's a foundational idea. And Tanya, just to mention it in very brief, is that in order for the world to exist and not return to its default status, which was nothingness, it has to have an external force constantly playing upon it. Just like a rock that wants to go down, gravity will continue to rise upwards only as long as there's an energy pushing it upwards. And once that energy runs out, it will go downwards to its default setting. So too, everything that exists wants to go back to being nothing. And the only reason why it doesn't go back to its original state of being nothing is because there's an external force that continues to perpetuate it. And that is the creative energy of God. So right there, as you think about the doctrine of perpetual creation, you look at the world around you. Remember, it's ahavas olam, the love through the world. You look at the world around you and you say, wow, all the beautiful things in this world that are so beautiful. You know, the sunrise, the sunset, the beach, the animals, the marine life, the mountains, the trees, the nature, everything. It's all being created by God at every single moment in time. OMG. Right? Oh my God, that's incredible. You realize, wow, if I get excited about nature, if I get excited about a hike or a dive or a cup of coffee or some delicious food, how much more so should I be getting excited, not about the food, but about the energy that creates the food? Because the food is only being created at every single moment in time. It's the energy creating the food which is of true value. And now Tanya takes it one step further when Tanya says, how does God create the world? He does so through a very specific mechanism, what I call a voice-activated interface. A voice-activated interface, which means God creates the world through his speech. This is what we were taught in the Torah. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So God creates everything through speaking it into existence. Now, not that God has a mouth or a palate or a tongue or a voice, but that is a metaphor for us to ponder. Why? What are we supposed to ponder? Just like my speech, my words, they might be nice, they might be inspiring, but they're nothing, absolutely nothing compared to me, the speaker. The speech is valueless vis-a-vis the speaker. So too, the energy that creates the world, which is God's speech energy, is nothing compared to God himself. So that's two steps. Number one, the world is nothing, has no value, no intrinsic value of its own. It's constantly being created by God, and therefore my allegiance should be with God and not with the beauty that I see in front of my eyes. Don't look at don't judge a book by its cover. Look inside of the book, how silly and how immature it would be for a person to walk around all day long recommending a book without ever opening it up. Right? If somebody walks around recommending a book and you ask him, do you ever read the book? And be like, no, I never bothered reading it, but I think it's a nice book. Why is it a nice book? Because it has a nice cover. So too, when you look at the world, you say, wow, the world is so beautiful, but why is the world so beautiful? It's because of what's inside of it. It's the creative energy of God. We pledge allegiance to God, to the intent, to the content, not to the cover. The content, not to the cover. I think Martin Luther King said something about that, right? And one step further, even when we get excited about the creative energy of God, which is the only item of true value in this world, then we say, 1 second, that creative energy of God is nothing compared to God himself. Just like my speech is nothing compared to me. If I ask you what you said on April 5th, 2020 at 8:55 a.m., you have no idea. Why? Because it doesn't matter. The word that you said 1 year ago today is of no consequence, of no value to you. What matters is me, is you, not the word that you spoke. It's done, it's gone, it's useless. So the speech of God that creates the world is also nothing compared to God himself. Taking this back to the analog, if you have a choice in front of you, if you have a $500 piece of meat, or you have a $2 bag of chips, what are you going to choose? If you have a food which is extremely healthy, good morning, Mickey, love you, Hebrew. Or if you have a food which is very unhealthy, what are you going to choose? So if you're shallow, if you live in the realm of klipa, which is the word that we've used before, if you don't know the meaning of that word, don't worry about it. I mean superficial. If you're superficial, then you'll say, well, this ice cream looks delicious. And this meat doesn't look so good. So I'm going to go for the superficial. Okay, that's shallow. It's a very shallow level of existence. But if you have wisdom, if you're able to see beyond what meets the eye, you can say, well, this has 1,000 calories and this is very, very healthy. So I'm going to go for what's very healthy and I'm not going to go for what's unhealthy. I'm going to invest in the rising stock, in the valuable stock, and I'm not going to waste my money by flushing it down the toilet into some junk stock, right? Same thing which you do with your financial investments, and same thing that you do with your nutritional choices, and the same thing that you do with the people that you choose to associate or to disassociate with. Same thing goes with values, with attachment. What do I want to become attached to? Do I want to connect emotionally to my car, to my status symbols, which are very superficial and valueless essentially, or do I want to become attached to the master of the universe, creator of heaven and earth, creator of my car, creator of my home, creator of my investment portfolio, creator of my wealth, what lies inside the book and not the cover of the book, and that is Hashem, the master of the universe. And that, my friends, is the idea of Avas Olam, loving God through the world. When you meditate upon this idea, and maybe next week I'd like to potentially create a meditation for this, a guided focused thinking thing, a thinking exercise for this. But what happens is, the Alter Rebbe says, you'll be filled with love the moment you do this, as soon as you marinate upon this idea. And you'll very quickly begin to lose interest in the fleeting pleasures that surround you by realizing how useless they are, just like a toy, a cheap 99-cent toy in the face of fine wine. Or the same way that fine wine becomes valueless in your eyes vis-a-vis love, right? If you had to choose between love or wine, you'd have to be an alcoholic to choose the wine, right? Your eyes are open to greater horizons, and you'll soon be tuned into a new reality, schlepped out of the coma in which we all live. The Alter Rebbe quotes King David in Psalm 73. You know, when people read the Psalms, I know Mickey over here, you often gripe about what King David is on about, and it's difficult to understand. Admittedly, I want to validate your concerns. It's difficult to understand what King David is on about. What is he talking about? But what the Alter Rebbe does in Tanya is that he puts things into perspective. King David was of higher consciousness. Take a look at this. I'm on page 559 if you have the book. Sorry, 560 if you have the book. He quotes King David in Psalm 73, who says, Mili b'shamayim v'imcha lo chafatzti ba'aretz. Whom else do I have to love in heaven? And besides you, I want no one on earth. King David is expressing his Avas Olam. And he continues, King David continues, he says, my body and heart expire out of love for you, God. God is forever the base of my heart and my portion. Look at this brilliance. He says, God is forever the base of my heart and my portion. God is the essence of everything. And when I can meditate upon this idea, how God is the essence of everything, I realize that I don't need the cover if I have the book. I don't need the label if I've got the wine. I want to pledge allegiance and become attached to the energy within, to the truth, to that which has true value, intrinsic value and not that which just has superficial perception. That is King David, who was of completely a different level. You know, we think of King David as like a guy, he had many wives, you know, and he fell in love with his woman. No. We don't even reach the ankles of where King David was holding. He was a true tzaddik. He was a person of such higher consciousness that for us to talk about him, for us to criticize King David, is like two earthworms outside criticizing you or me for how we choose to trample the grass. It's laughable. And that's why the Talmud indeed says that anybody who says that David sinned doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what the Talmud says. Not because the Talmud is whitewashing or sanitizing King David's choices and actions, but because you and I don't begin to understand. We're not even in the same dimension as this guy who lived on a whole different plane. The Alter Rebbe concludes his point by saying that it's much easier for someone who's already passionate, who's already in love with life. Let's say you love baseball. Let's say you love baseball. You're crazy about baseball. It's much easier for that person to now shift that existing love into a love for Hashem. It's more difficult for a person who's like a dead fish. You know, you have people that don't get excited about anything. Nothing they get excited about. It's more difficult for them. But they too, says the Alter Rebbe, can get inspired through this meditation. Friends, I'm gonna end it over here unless you have any questions or comments. I do have to go. But I want to thank you for joining me this morning. I'd like next week to consider doing a guided, focused meditation exercise on this specific idea, which is very powerful, very reachable. And let's see if we can do that. Meanwhile, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me this morning. I'm not sure if tomorrow morning I can give a class. At this point, I don't believe that I will be able to give a class. I will probably be on an airplane tomorrow morning. So I don't think I will be giving a class. I'm sorry it's a personal issue that's going on. I don't know if I'll be able to give a class tomorrow morning. So at this point, I'm not planning on giving a class unless something changes. Okay. But hopefully Thursday and Friday, hopefully I will be able to do so. It's going to be the rest of this week is going to be a little bit touch and go. So please bear with me. Thank you for your understanding. Anyways, have a wonderful day, everybody. Shalom. Thank you for joining me today.